Breaking news out of the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced he is resigning. It comes after weeks of pressure from ministers and lawmakers calling on him to step down. Here is some of what he had to say outside Downing Street a little earlier this morning.
The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News international correspondent Molly Hunter, who joins us from London. Molly, good morning. Big news for you across the pond here. We've been talking about this pressure on Starmer to quit for months now. Why did it finally happen today, do we think?
Yeah, Savannah, this is not a huge surprise, not entirely unexpected. We've been talking about this pressure that's been ramping up, and basically in the last couple of days, it's been almost kind of a rebellion as senior cabinet ministers have abandoned ship. Now, our understanding is that the prime minister spent the weekend out at his country estate, Chequers, with his wife, with his kids, kind of reflecting on the decision. And you heard it there just now in the sound that you played, Savannah. He said it was very clear. He had received the message from his party that party members no longer had faith in his leadership. So he clearly decided why this morning, we're not exactly sure, but he clearly decided that it was no longer tenable. Savannah.
Molly, what happens next? What do we know about a timetable for when exactly he steps down?
Right. So while this was not a total surprise, what Labour leaders and what many people in the country were waiting to hear is what would actually be the process. And he did lay that out in his speech. So we have a little bit of a timeline. Nominations for his replacement, so other Labour leaders who could possibly take over, that will open up July 9th. Then there are two options based on the British political system. So if there is only one candidate, Savannah, it will be an orderly transition, what British journalists are calling kind of a coronation. It will pass from Keir Starmer to the next person. And I know we're going to get to him, but Andy Burnham is the runaway favorite. He is the former mayor of Manchester. He just won a parliament seat by a resounding margin on Friday. But if there are multiple candidates, there will be a leadership contest. So an election for prime minister within the Labour Party. Now, Starmer said all of that will be wrapped up by September, Savannah. That is a pretty tight timeline. He will stay in office. But I just want to flag actually one part of his very short, very measured speech this morning is actually getting a lot of attention here. Take a listen to that.
And when I leave the biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife, Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children, who are my pride and my joy.
And you hear him choking up there, Savannah. This is a man who is often criticized for kind of failing to show emotion, failing to emotionally connect with the electorate. So that's part of the speech that people are really talking about this morning. Savannah.
Molly, you mentioned this front runner, Andy Burnham. What would he do differently? What's different about the two men?
Well, so a lot of it will wait to be seen. We're obviously waiting to hear any kind of reaction from Andy Burnham and Andy Burnham's team today. But he does appear to be the runaway favorite. It is definitely not a done deal, as I just described. But he's the former mayor of Greater Manchester. He is nicknamed the King of the North. He has a lot of pride for the north of this country, and he is riding a real wave of popularity. Now, he is not an unknown quantity to Labour leaders. He's tried to win Labour leadership elections before. He lost in 2010 to Ed Miliband. He lost in 2015 to Jeremy Corbyn. But when he won this special election, Savannah, on Friday, huge support, huge popularity, he laid out kind of a distinct vision of this country that included taking utilities back into public ownership and, really importantly, decentralizing Westminster's power. He really wants more power to be in the hands of regional leaders. So we'll be watching this one very, very closely, Savannah.
Molly, even before the announcement, President Trump weighed in. I want to read some of what he said. He said Keir Starmer will resign as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He failed badly on two very important subjects, immigration and energy, going on to say, I wish him well. How's that being received over there? What do you think it says about the current relationship here?
Yeah, the current relationship, as we have documented, as we have talked about, Savannah, lots over the last couple of months, is not a good one. That will certainly be in the hands of the next prime minister. Keir Starmer definitely talked about how he mended relations with European leaders, didn't say much about how he had approached or how he had kind of managed that relationship with the White House. But certainly we're waiting for any kind of reaction from the White House today. I assume we will hear a very, I would say, no, maybe I told you so from President Trump later today. Savannah.
All right. Molly Hunter covering breaking news for us this morning out of the UK. Thanks, Molly. Good to see you.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.